Hey guys, I'm Jeffrey and this is AutoAlchemy, the intersection between typology and self-growth. And today I'm hoping to make a quick video, fingers crossed, that I think will illustrate some dynamics from the objective personality system. So this video is going to be an analysis of a video that I recently saw on Michaela Peterson's YouTube channel. And in that video, Michaela is speaking with the comedian JP Sears. So before I dive in, I just want to say that this video is going to be a sort of condensed, abbreviated analysis. If you guys want to watch a more in-depth, thorough analysis, you can go to my Buy Me a Coffee page, and if you become a member for $7 a month, you can have access to extended footage of things like this. You can have access to bonus content, behind the scenes stuff, and even early access to other YouTube videos. Many perks. If you guys want to check it out, please feel free to do so. I will put a link down in the description and down in the comments. The topic of Michaela's video, how to fight the woke, it's a pretty polarizing conversation. You know, it really gets at the heart of the quote-unquote culture wars. And I suppose when it comes to typing people and thinking about type, I'm definitely drawn to more polarizing conversations. When we're triggered, then we are less likely to be acting from a place of deliberate intentionality, and what that means is we fall back on our default programs, and therefore our cognitive machinery becomes all the more apparent. Anyway, JP is a visual, ISFP, pretty standard, FISE, and then his animal stack, consume, sleep, blast, and play. Michaela is kinesthetic, ESTP, SETI, consume, sleep, blast, play. So, right away, there are some interesting similarities and differences between these two people. So, the main thing that catches my eye right out of the gate is that they both have the same animal stack. Obviously, another thing that jumps out at me is that they are both Savior SE, and both of them are Savior DI. So that means that they have the shared human need of identity / significance. One of them is an observer, that's Michaela, and one of them is a decider, that is JP. Another big difference between the two of them is that Michaela is Savior thinking, whereas JP is Savior feeling. Moving on, we are going to comb through this video, and I'm just going to be looking for things that I originally thought were illuminating.
Progressed primarily into doing emotional work with people, certainly under a coaching umbrella. So helping people, a lot of times it would, like, what's going on in your life, some level of self-sabotage, dissatisfaction, reoccurring dysfunctional patterns in relationships. And oftentimes where we'd land, the work we'd be doing would be on unresolved childhood issues. That work with the people I was working with, and certainly I had to do that kind of work on myself, otherwise I'm just a hypocrite. That certainly laid the groundwork for how I do comedy. The comedy I do, usually it's got an intention of somehow helping people, whether that's wake them up out of the fear stupor they're living in, wake them up to embracing their power, listening to their heart, being brave, whatever it might be.
So the reason that I played that clip, I thought that it did a pretty good job of showcasing at least one approach to having Savior feeling. People who are Savior feeling are at ease in the emotional realm and in the realm of values, processing, doing emotional labor, embracing your power, listening to your heart, being brave. Now that doesn't mean that they're always going to be brave, but they are going to think in those terms. It's going to be natural for them to think in those terms. Again, that doesn't mean that they have the skills needed to always effectively modulate or moderate their emotions. It just means that that's how they're framing their perceptions. He was so at home in the realm of emotional value, moving emotions, harnessing his own emotions, pushing other people's emotions, that he said, hey, I can help you move from emotional state A to emotional state D. So that's really impressive. That's always something that I admire in people.
A very obvious clue is when people are restricted by fears, when people are being obedient to authorities outside of themselves, first and foremost. So when someone outsources their truth, that is a very scared person. A brave person doesn't outsource their truth. They'll of course listen to the counsel of outside sources, and they'll also cut off the counsel of outside sources when those outside sources don't warrant their energy. So I think a brave person listens to their heart, their own mind, their own thinking, pays attention to their gut first and foremost, and of course will listen to outside sources and cut them off when they deserve to be cut off.
I'm seeing this notion of self versus tribe. Ultimately, for him, the punchline is that you have to follow your truth, your perspective, follow your gut. He tries to pay lip service to this notion of outside sources, and I almost think of that in an extroverted thinking kind of way, like looking to the spectrum of what is this person saying about this? What do they think makes sense? What about this person? What about this person? And at the end of the day, notice how he keeps emphasizing, you have to know when to cut them off. Again, he's seeing the individual, the DI, as being the hero of the story. The external tribe, at best, can be there as a support system. Notice how he talks a lot about a brave person, a horrible person. You don't want to be around this kind of person. I rarely think in those terms. That's another decider approach to thinking through reality. Because you're so unbalanced between that first function and that fourth function and self and tribe, that you associate evil with the opposite. So he sees evil spread out amongst people. We saw what JP looks like when he's in a savior state, talking about emotions and values, and now we're going to hear Michaela talk a little bit about her own default approach to her deciders.
When I was sick and I was paying attention to the medical system, I used to use logic for all of my decisions.
Yeah.
So this is what makes the most sense, and I completely ignored my gut instinct because I thought, well, that's not logical, it doesn't make any sense, and if I can't figure it out, then it's wrong.
Yeah.
Which was overestimating my cognitive abilities for sure. But how would you suggest people start listening to what you call their own truth?
Yeah.
I almost don't even need to say it. I use logic. I try to make the most rational decision. The other thing to talk about here is the notion of not being able to trust your gut. In her head, most likely, the gut is probably affiliated with that NF perspective. Trusting your gut means trusting these emotional impulses, these emotional pulls and tugs and pushes, and simultaneously, it's probably associated with intuitive insight, being able to see a pattern that you can't fully prove in the sensory. The fact that we're seeing both of those things in one sentence, the appeal to proving things in a sensory fashion and trying to rationally, logically justify things in that same fashion, alongside the resistance to the NF perspective, I think it's a good thing that we're seeing both of those.
I think it's super helpful to rewrite the perspective on uncomfortability, because a lot of the programming I know I used to carry, and I think the University of Society teaches us that if something's uncomfortable, it's bad for you.
As somebody who is savior feeling at the top, his thinking function is going to be heavily repressed, which means it is going to be contaminated with all of that other psychic gunk, and you can see that leaking out. I think you can even see that leaking out in how he uses the term programming to talk about this is what those evil people out there are doing. They're programming us. Programming is a very logically oriented piece of terminology, and we're being programmed by the university of society. University is a place where you go to learn to think.
Our truth takes us in the direction of the blessings, not what Fauci tells us, how it fulfills Bill Gates' agenda. Yeah.
Oh man, that's good. Deciders like to call out specific people. In this case, it's really funny that he is calling out Dr. Fauci and Bill Gates, both of whom have actually been typed NOP as INTPs. So we have this guy who lives from a very SF headspace, and the villains in the story, in his Decider story where there are heroes and villains, the villains happen to be these NT guys. Whoa.
But what is it that made you change from more of that like health and wellness comedy to the political commentary, I would say?
Yeah, I love that. I had no intention of getting into politics. I never found it interesting. I always found it a waste of time. And it's just like these faces, these figureheads that aren't doing anything, just make a lot of noise. Never interested in it. Then their freedom started getting taken away. That impacted me. And specifically when COVID stopped becoming a medical issue and started becoming a political issue, which still blows my mind. And also tells me it ain't a medical issue.
Demon intuition. There are things unseen, and those things are bad. That's the intuition and the control of the OI. So NI, something is controlling me. I watched another Michaela Peterson video at one point where she talked about feeling like she was caught in the spider web.
Warned by all the platforms, and of course I do my best to know what are the red flags that the big tech tyrants will just automatically eject you out of YouTube or Facebook.
This connects to the idea of Bill Gates, Dr. Fauci, etc. as being the villains in his story. He's talking about the big tech tyrants. So again, he's a decider. He's making this about people. It's an us versus them conversation, and big tech. Again, there's something weird about the NT. He's scared of being controlled by these technological forces that his little SF mind can't handle. That's me sort of projecting a story into what's going on, but that's all that I can really do. I think it's a pretty compelling story that fits all of the data available.
I started this section on my podcast called Opposing Views, where I'll have one view on and the opposite view on.
Yeah.
And so I'm seeing if that's okay. So far it seems to be okay.
I think that this is a moment of Michaela's double decider nature coming out. Double deciders have their thinking and their feeling functions in the middle of their stacks. They are balanced with self and tribe.
I always, if I'm trying to play devil's advocate, I assume that the reason, this is devil's advocate, but I would assume the reason people like David Icke are censored is because they think that, I don't know who they is, but they think that his ideas are dangerous and that mass amounts of people will start believing him and it'll upset society.
Yeah, I think that sounds very reasonable. And if I was playing devil's advocate to that devilish advocate, I would say I bet that is the big tech censorship spoken rationalization for censoring him. Yet I would also be very suspicious that they have a deeper reason for censoring him, which is maybe just the opposite. Not so much, hey, what he's saying is so false, it might influence people and negatively influence society, but some of what he says is so true, it will upset the control that we're trying to impose on society.
The control.
So, who knows? That's just what...
Who knows?
The devil's advocate to the devil's advocate might say.
I think it makes sense that Michaela Peterson, who has introverted thinking as a savior and who is also a double decider, would be trying to do this. It kind of connects to this idea of the opposing viewpoints. She's trying to keep this balance. She's trying to not go too all in. She doesn't even know who they are. She doesn't label a particular enemy, and then when he responds, he's quick to label the enemy as these big tech guys once again, and then he tries to play the devil's advocate, but it just seems so fake, right? Like, you can tell that he's giving you his legitimate perspective that there's more going on behind the scenes. And then he's like, well, that's what the devil's advocate to the devil's advocate might say. No, dude, like, take ownership of your perspective. That's genuinely what you think. Yeah, so it's all just very interesting. Hopefully working through things in that way was informative for people. Let me know what you guys thought about the video. I really hope you liked it. This is a little bit different as far as approaches go. Thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to check out my Buy Me a Coffee page, and I will see you guys next time. Till then.